Welcome to the show. This is part of our Healthcare Leadership Insights. We're glad you've joined us, and I've got a great guest today to talk about leadership, and he's definitely qualified to talk about the subject. Mr. Omar Reid, he's the Chief People Officer here at Harris Health, located here in Houston, Texas, in Harris County. They do a wonderful job for us here in the county. With over 11,000 employees, 2 major hospitals, including a level 1 trauma hospital in the medical center, as well as over 40 clinics here in the Houston, Harris County area. Definitely a big task, but he's the man for the task as the Chief People Officer here at Harris Health. So welcome to the show, Omar.
Thank you, Wallace. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for always thinking about Harris Health as you continue to do these innovative and creative things with your HR Maximizer platform.
Thank you, and I feel honored that not only that you're here, but you're dressed to the nines, my man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Whenever I get together with you, I want to make sure I look my best. So absolutely, thank you so much.
I appreciate that. We did want to talk a lot about leadership because this is a subject that a lot of people in our healthcare executive groups are asking. And so when we poll them, what are some things that you're looking for? That was the top topic, was leadership.
Right.
And from your perspective, you're going to give us some insight today that I wanted to kind of really dive into for our audience.
Absolutely.
One thing I did want you to explain very briefly is the mission of the organization, because I think that is important to share, and then we'll get into the leadership.
Yeah, so Harris Health is a safety net healthcare system here in, as you said, Houston, Texas. And our mission is to take care of underserved and marginalized populations, those persons who find themselves uninsured and underinsured. Those are our main patients who come in to see us on a daily basis. And our goal is to make sure that we provide them with the same level of health care that they would receive at a institution that was for-profit. And so we try very diligently, deliberately, intentionally every day to make sure that those persons are receiving the same level of care that they would receive someplace else outside of our organization.
And we appreciate that. So thank you for the great job that you're.
We're very fortunate and blessed to be able to do that for the patients that we serve. And everybody who works here is mission driven and mission focused. And that was one of the things that makes us a different organization.
And that's one thing I've seen just as I've visited each of your facilities. And I've got a chance to really tour through doing the recording of the videos. And it's not like somebody put it on a face for us. I mean, these folks are really happy and excited about working here. They're nice. I love visiting your facilities.
Well, thank you so much. And we see that every day in the people who come to work for us every day. They could go work any place, but their dedication is to Harris Health and dedicated to the population that we serve. So we're very fortunate to have those people who want to be here, who continue to show up here on a daily basis.
Very good. So I wanted to ask you, because you wrote a book about leadership, that's a big part of who you are and what you do as a leader. You're a servant leader. And so I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to really get into leadership? If you don't mind, tell me about what inspired you to start that journey to leadership.
Wallace, I really think it started at a young age. I'm a child of the Midwest, and I grew up in Ohio. And as I reflect upon my journey into leadership, I remember in the 8th grade, I was put in a leadership position in an organization called the Sigma Beta Club. And the person who was I guess he would have been our executive director, he would have been our mentor. I can't exactly remember what his title was at the time. He really started to instill in me the importance of leadership and the characteristics of leadership. And he started to give me confidence and growth in my leadership. He's still a mentor today. His name is Carter Womack. He is probably one of the most accomplished persons that I know. But it just started off watching his role modeling and behavior and says, I want to be like him. And then along this journey that I've been on for all of these years, I keep seeing people who are great leaders, and I see the impact that they have on organizations, on communities, on our country. And I just became, totally enamored, totally fixated on how to make myself a better leader after watching so many great role models lead me.
Okay, I love how you put a face to it. You put a name to it.
Yes.
And so this person, Carter. So thinking about Carter, what would you say was one of the biggest qualities you saw up front that it attracted you to him as a mentor?
He was an excellent communicator. So, I mean, I'll just tell you, he is a person who communication skills are par excellence. I mean, he amazing communicator, but he's also very compassionate. And so he runs a program out of Columbus, Ohio right now, where he mentors young men. He's still mentoring young men all these years later. He's still mentoring young men with a program called the BOLD Initiative. Can't remember exactly what BOLD stands for.
Okay.
But that initiative that he started is still impacting lives. And that communication that he does, he's the only person that I know, he's been president of a national fraternity twice. So he was president of the fraternity Phi Beta Sigma for the 50th anniversary, and then he decided after so many years he was going to be president again of the fraternity. So he is, I mean, leadership is what he does, and his role modeling of it for me really started me on that journey to wanting to be a leader and trying to inspire others into leadership.
Now, you said communication, and that is so important. That means different things to different people. So I would like you to kind of expand a little bit more. Is he the type of person who used like big fancy words? Was he like gregarious? Or how would you describe his communication and what impressed you with his communication?
I think certainly, he is his communication, his vocabulary is expansive, but he's also able to bring that down so ordinary people can understand what he's saying. So I also think that in communication, and you probably have heard this before, that silent and listen has the same letters. And I think being able to listen is an important part of communication. As a matter of fact, I think it might be the most important communication skill that one can develop, because as you are silent and you are listening, you can understand what is going on in whatever situation that you are engaged in. I like to tell people all the time, and this is not something I came up. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means what? We should listen more than we talk. But because by listening, we can find out what is important to the person that we are engaging in that relationship with. And if we can find out what is important to that person we are engaging in a relationship with, our relationship is going to be so much better. And leaders are listeners, but leaders are also engagers as they are understanding what is going on in their surrounding. So Carter is certainly one of those persons who is a great listener, and I think he kind of instilled that upon me. As a matter of fact, I like to say that my greatest strength, one of my greatest strengths, is my ability to listen. And that goes on in probably about 99% of the situations. The one person who says I'm a horrible listener is my wife, and so I understand, I never get listening scores from her, but everybody else thinks that I'm a pretty good listener.
In silence, sometimes it's tough to not say anything, especially if you are good at communication. So my question to you is, what are some things you do intentionally that has helped you to be able to be a good listener? Because you have gotten this feedback from your team. So what do you think has helped you? Is it intentional? Is it coming natural for you? How are you developing that?
I think it's very intentional, and I think the thing that helps me is that I listen first to understand and not respond. So a lot of persons who are listening to people are not listening to understand, and they're listening because as soon as I stop talking, guess what? They want to start talking, and they want to interject their thoughts into it. So I've learned the skill, the art of being patient when I'm listening and not automatically formulating what I'm going to say as soon as that person finishes their communication. So sometimes it's about processing that information and then trying to understand what is the best approach to responding, and not just responding immediately upon somebody. So I always practice, and I slow myself down and say, okay, what is this person actually saying to me, and what should my response be as I'm listening to them? Not necessarily just listening to say, all right, we're engaged in this dialogue back and forth. I want to truly understand the point that person is making. So listening to respond is extremely important.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
Listening to understand. I'm sorry. Listening to understand is not to respond. Listening to understand. Yes, got
absolutely. Appreciate that. Can you think of what leadership qualities are crucial for people on, let's say they're on your team, or those who are evaluating in the organization to become leaders? What are some of those key characteristics that you think that you're looking for in those leaders?
Yeah, so I think that, authenticity is a key characteristic because people can tell when you're being fake. Leaders who are standing up and faking it, people see straight through them right now. There's a lot more transparency, and people can see a fake a mile away. So I think authenticity is certainly important. Letting people know that you care about them, that you're engaged about, that their priorities sometimes are your priorities. I think another important characteristic is obviously integrity. We want people who are in leadership roles to be people of integrity. That means doing what's right when somebody's watching, and also doing what's right when somebody's not watching. So integrity, authenticity. A new one, and it's not really new, but it's an important one, is courage. It takes courage to be a leader because sometimes you're going to make decisions that are not popular.
Right.
And when you're making those decisions that are not popular, guess what? You're going to start taking some heat from people because guess what? You're doing something that is not popular. So it takes courage, especially in the times that we're living in right now. It takes courage to make decisions that are countercultural, that are not in alignment with the correct political ideology. So being courageous is another important characteristic of leadership from my perspective.
You hit on something that is quite interesting with the courage. One of the things I've heard too is for new leaders is being afraid of making a mistake, especially if it is going against the grain, so to speak, because they feel like the leash is short, and they may lose their job, lose their position. So what would you say to that in terms of developing courage? What are some things they could maybe ask themselves to make sure that they are making a good decision, especially if it is against the grain?
Yeah, so I think there's, leadership is certainly what I would call paradoxical. There is this paradoxy in leadership where there is, let's just say, gas and brake at the same time.
Right.
As you're driving forward, you got to figure out what that is. And depending on the organization that you're in, it may be more brake than gas. And so you've got to figure out the context of what you are dealing with and, make decisions on the content of what you are producing. So content without context is confusion. And so I think that it is important for you to understand where you are on that leadership journey. Early on in your career, you can make mistakes, and hopefully it doesn't cost you your job. But as you get further and further into your leadership journey, the more mistakes you make, the larger the magnitude, probably because the larger scope you have over people as you're making that journey. So what I would say to people is, make mistakes early in your leadership career because that's when people expect you to make them. Learn from those mistakes. Just don't continue to repeat the same mistake over and over. We're all fallible. Nobody is, a perfect human being. We're going to make mistakes. Did you learn from it? Did you grow from it? And so those things help us in our journey as leaders. And then, sometimes you have to ask for grace and you have to ask for forgiveness when you make a mistake. Yes.
That's good. That's a great point.
Thank you.
Do you think that, there's an old saying, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. What are your thoughts on that?
I have lived in both of those worlds where you had to ask for permission before you make a decision, but also have found some of my greatest successes when I asked for forgiveness and not permission to get something done. I've been on this leadership journey for a very long time, and some of my greatest successes have come when I was empowered to take those risks as a leader, when I felt comfortable that there was not going to be any type of punishment or retribution when I made a mistake. So yes, I think certainly asking for permission, but it also is disempowering. It also means, how are you going to make breakthrough progress if every time you've got to go and ask for permission? And so leadership is about creativity, about innovation, about influence. And if you don't have the opportunity to ask for forgiveness and you're always asking for permission, then that's sort of limiting in the scope of what you might be trying to accomplish. And so we live in an age right now where there's all types of information and all types of different ways to solve problems. And so if you're saying you're in an organization where everybody has to solve the problem the same way, that's a very myopic way of looking at how to get things done. And, we live in a world where there's infinitesimal, infinite amount of possibilities on how to solve problems. So I think hopefully people are allowing people to be creative and innovative in the way that they're solving problems.
And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier about content without context is confusion.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to stick
No, you can have it.
Okay.
I didn't come up with it. So I brought it from somebody much smarter than me.
So I guess the context would be maybe just taking a nice lay of the land of your organization,
Absolutely.
seeing where you can kind of, in some cases, push some of those boundaries,
Right.
where you may have to ask for a little bit of forgiveness.
Right. Well, I think that, we talked about context, content, but you're also talking about contribution and how can you contribute to what the organization is trying to accomplish.
Right.
And is that your number one thought? Hey, how can I contribute to what the organization is trying to accomplish? And then if that is what you're always at the front of your mind, then more than likely you're going to be in alignment with what is going on inside of the organization. So you got to do it with the right motives, though, because some people are doing things for themselves and not for the organization. And that brings me back to what is your number one goal in doing what you're doing? Is it to promote yourself? Is it to promote the organization? Before you become a leader, it's all about developing yourself. Once you become a leader, it's all about developing your people and making sure that they're successful. Because the more successful your people are, the more successful you will become. You just need to make sure that you give them credit for that success and not try to act like you came up with all the ideas on your own.
Yeah, I like that. I like the point you mentioned about intent.
Right.
Because the intent has a lot to do with the motivation. Why are you making these choices? Is it for yourself or is it for the betterment of the organization? And is it aligned with the mission of the organization?
Yeah, and a lot of people make those decisions not because they're doing it for the betterment of the organization, but they're doing it to promote themselves.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, people see through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They see through it.
Right, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Okay, now I'm curious about this mug you got here. Maybe we need to turn it where the audience can see it here.
So I brought this mug because it's one of my favorite mugs and it sits in my office. And
let's turn it that way with the camera.
Okay, and as you can see, it says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." That's a quote by Martin Luther King. And so I am a follower, a student of him. And as we're talking about leadership, obviously Dr. King was able to do amazing things as a leader. But this is one of the quotes that I think is so appropriate because as we step into these things, we have to speak out on the things that matter. We can't become silent, and leadership is all about speaking out on those things that matter and not being silent about them. And that's in a business setting, that's in a religious setting, that's in a personal setting. The things that matter are the things that we have to step up and speak out about.
I love it. That's great. How would you say you continue to foster a culture of continuous growth and development in Harris Health?
Well, I think one of the things that I know is that if you leave growth to randomness, you'll live in mediocrity. So growth has to be deliberate and intentional. And so one of the things that we're always talking about is, how do we get better as a team? The standard goes up every single year for us organizationally. It's not like we're going to keep doing the same thing at the same level. The performance level that meets expectation in 2024 will be below expectation in 2025. So I'm constantly raising the bar on what is acceptable performance, and the intentionality around growth and development is always a part of that. Making sure that we are, we are reading books, making sure that we are listening to TED Talks, making sure that we are listening to podcasts, and we're doing those things collectively. Now, I expect the teammates to do them individually, but I also am sharing information with them and says, hey, listen to this, let's talk about it. And so they in turn share information with me. We read books, we do all of those things. I think there's a saying that says iron sharpens iron. And so we are always trying to make sure that we are that iron that is sharpening each other.
I'm familiar with that. That's one of my favorite proverbs.
Yes,
That's
sir.
excellent. So now with that, what about in terms of resources so they can do those things? And when you say reading books, podcasts, is this something that you're suggesting system-wide? Is it certain departments? I'd love to hear about that.
So specifically in my department, the books are assigned. We're reading those things together.
Okay, wow.
Also, yeah, specifically in my department. And then I also have two different leadership tracks. I have what I call everyday leaders, and also I have a leadership now. So these are persons who, some of them are in leadership positions, some of them are not in leadership positions, but I'll tell you something about my thought on leadership. I believe that leadership is personal and not positional. So whether you have a title that says I am a leader, I absolutely believe that everybody has influence, and so that means everybody has leadership associated with them. And so how do we make sure that those persons are perfecting and prospering and bringing those skills forward so that for the betterment not only of themselves, but for the betterment of the organization? And so I think that it's important that we continue to focus on that. Another saying that I will tell you is that change is optional. I mean, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. And so change is inevitable, growth is optional. So we want to make sure that we are pouring things into ourselves to make sure that we are continuing to grow as a team and grow as an organization. We've got a whole organizational development team that works organizationally to make sure that we are continuing to move forward. We got some really smart people that sit in there. Most of them have PhDs and have been doing this for years. And so we've been very selective, once again, deliberate and intentional in hiring those people and putting them in positions to make sure that we are making the progress we want to organizationally. The other great thing about that is it's supported by our CEO. And so when the CEO is participating in those classes and participating in those leadership opportunities, taking, classes just randomly, he may show up on, he has something online and he may show up in there. And so it is important for us to make sure that we are continuing to push the boundaries as a HR department, but also make sure we're pushing the boundaries organizationally so that we can continue to rise.
So if you don't mind, share with me a book that you've assigned in the past and it's worked really good for your team. You've gotten good feedback. They've learned some things from it.
I think, the book we're reading, or organization, the book we're reading right now is Atomic Habits. And so
yes,
James Clear's Atomic Habits is a book that we're looking at organizationally. I think a book that we read departmentally was called Chess, Not Checkers. And so really trying to think about, how to be more strategic in our actions. If you think about chess and checkers, those are two different games that people play. So I think, I just was talking to the team last week about a book I'm reading called Explaining or Explanations, or it's something like that. But it's a book by a BBC journalist that talks about how to become a better explainer, a better communicator of those things. And so we are always on the lookout, surveying the landscape for books that will help make us better.
Love that. That's awesome. Now, what do you believe right now is one of the most significant leadership challenges amongst leaders in general?
Yeah, so I think, I would say that one of the most significant challenges is for people in my seat is making sure that the organization is prepared for the future. So, organizations, this is a time of tremendous disruption. You've got all kind of things. We just came through COVID. We've got AI coming in. We've got all of these different things that are leaning and pressing on our organization. We got baby boomers leaving. We got millennials and Generation Xers coming in. So you're living in this vortex of change and making sure that there is stabilization for the present, but also keeping an eye on what are the future trends that you need to be aware of. So I think leaders, especially people that sit in my seat, have to make sure that, we're agile, we're adaptable,
Right.
that we're adroit, that we are looking at all the things that are going on right now, making sure that, we're trying to stay on top of them to the best of our ability, while also pushing the employees and pushing the organization forward and saying, hey, my turn is almost over. I'm about to hand this baton to you. So make sure to prepare yourself for taking this baton because the race will continue.
Oh, I love that. Now, would you say it's more difficult to have your team looking more towards the future or stabilizing for the present? You mentioned both.
I think, there's so much uncertainty about the future. I think you can certainly stabilize the present. We've done a good job with that here at Harris Health System, but looking towards what the future looks like and making sure, technology is coming in very fast,
Right.
and we're trying to figure out, we don't know what 6 months from now is going to look like from a technological perspective. And so having that adaptability, having that flexibility, having that, mindset of understanding, we've got to be agile enough to be aligned with things that are happening in the future is extremely important. So stabilization, yeah, we kind of reached that point. Looking towards the future, I think is probably a little more difficult.
Understood. If you could share with us what's been a recent initiative at Harris Health that you've undertaken that's had a significant impact on employee engagement and satisfaction.
Yeah, so one of the things I think we're very proud of right now is our nursing turnover. So we've done, I think some people talk about, well, what's the silver bullet that you've been able to utilize to stabilize your nursing turnover? And I'd like to say it's probably not a silver bullet, it's a silver BBs. And when I talk about silver BBs, I'm talking about there's multiple things that we've done. I think the thing that really has helped us is that this focus on our culture, making sure that we are recognizing, recognition, respect, and trust are three of the tenets of the culture that we are trying to create here at Harris Health System. And so focusing on those things, I think our compensation has been in line. I think our nursing succession has sort of worked out for us. And so putting all those things together, I think is very important for us organizationally, but just having leaders who are engaged. We conducted our employee engagement survey last November. We organizationally released the results to all of the employees. It says, here's where we scored. Here are the 4 things that we'll be focusing on for the upcoming year. We've got a manager of culture and experience who's out there talking to our employees, looking for disconnects and where things are not aligned in the way that we want them to be. And we're always listening to what our employees are saying, trying to make sure, we have executive rounding where our CEO is sending us out to engage with the employees. So there's lots of different things that we're doing organizationally that I believe have led to that level of success. But it all starts with that relationship. And
Right.
One of the most important things is building that trust in the relationship. And so I think that is an important characteristic that has helped us also organizationally, is building this trusting relationship with employees.
So as you're doing your rounding, what's some of the feedback you're getting? Like, if you don't mind, explain to our viewers what's part of your rounding and how are they responding to it?
Yeah, so we round every 2 weeks and we visit different places in the organization. And so, we're going and we've got a set of questions, what can we be doing better? I think, I can't remember, Ed Koch was the old mayor from New York, and he'd walk around the streets and he always asked the people, what can we do better? And what can we do better is a question that we asked our employees. Are you getting enough communication? Do you know what's going on here organizationally? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. We've also tried to create this multi-channel communication. We don't just send emails. We've got videos, we've got podcasts, we've got all types of ways to communicate with our employees, still recognizing that there's opportunities for us to raise the level of how we engage and interact and communicate with our employees. Our CEO has a town hall every 2 weeks, one in the afternoon, and then one at 5:30 in the morning, 5:15 in the morning, to make sure we're covering that shift too. So we are engaging with our employees in multiple ways to try to make sure that we are hearing what they're saying, and not just hearing what they're saying, taking action upon what they're saying. I think that is a critical step that a lot of people miss out on. You can hear what people are saying, but once you hear, there's some expectation that there is some action that goes along with what you hear. Because if you're just hearing, and people don't see action, at some point they stop giving your feedback. And one of the things that we say here at Harris Health is that feedback is a gift. And when we're given that feedback, we now have a responsibility to act upon the feedback that we are receiving.
I love that. Feedback is a gift. That's so true. And I have heard that from a lot of different nurses, is that, yes, we've had opportunities to share our concerns, but nothing's done about it.
Right.
And
right.
So you're right. If it's done so many times, then they're just going to start giving feedback.
Absolutely. I'll give you one example. So last week I was at one of our clinics, and one of our employees, frontline employees, I love them all, gave me some feedback on our compensation. And she was concerned about her particular compensation, and where she came into the organization at, and how she was progressing through the organization. And I said, thank you for giving me that feedback. Now let me have an opportunity to go back and check into what you just told me. Well, less than an hour ago, I was on the phone talking to her, saying, okay, here's what I was able to find out after that conversation. So even at my level, it's not uncommon for me to talk to a frontline employee, schedule a 15-minute conversation to make sure that there's a follow-up on what they talked about or what the concern that was brought to me. And so I think it's important for all of us, and so especially in my HR department, I have a 24-hour turnaround time. So if you get an email, there's an expectation that within 24 hours, somebody has responded to that employee's concern, and we don't just let those things go into a black hole. And it may just be we're looking into it, or it may be here's the resolution. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge what we are hearing from the employees, and not just to let them think nobody's listening.
Right. No, that's excellent. That's a great lesson for other leaders. What would you say has been the most rewarding initiative that you've been involved in recently at Harris Health?
I think one of the things that I've seen that has been very rewarding to me is in 2021, we increased our fertility benefits. And so it wasn't because we just did it, it was because I had a conversation with an employee who came to me and says, hey, our fertility benefits are a little lagging behind others in the in the Texas Medical Center.
Okay.
And so I said, let me look into it. We looked into it, and the employee was right. And so there was some opportunity for really increase at a very nominal cost to the organization. We increased the fertility benefits. And I was standing at the desk downstairs, and an employee came up to me and said, you're my hero. Well, the first thing I said was, go tell my boss that before anything else happens. But when she told me I was her hero, I had no idea why. Well, I had forgotten that this was the employee who was talking to me about the fertility benefits, and she now has a beautiful set of twins. And so just to be able to have any small role in that process by increasing our fertility benefits, I will tell you, it blows me away. As a matter of fact, if you were to come to my office right now, there's a picture of those two twins that sit on my desk because I asked the mother for a picture of the twins. They just recently turned 1, and it reminds me of why we do what we do every single day, because we impact people's lives. And by being responsive and being able to make those types of connections and those types of decisions, it makes us better as an organization. But think about that mother, think about that father, think about how much joy is going to be brought into their lives just by a simple change in the benefits that we were able to make.
That's amazing, and that's a big topic of conversation today.
Yeah.
As so many couples need this type of help with the fertility. So wonderful job on this. I really want to thank you for the time you spent today. And if you could just, I have two last things to do. One question for you is, if you have the ability to speak all human languages, would you pick that or the ability to talk to animals?
Come on, speak all human languages. I mean, think of the diversity of the world that we live in. I was just upstairs a few minutes ago, and I'm writing an article for my monthly HR newsletter, and the topic of the article is what unites us. And what unites us is language. What unites us is being able to communicate. And so there are over 145 languages that are spoken in Houston. I just did the research. So think if I could go out and communicate in 145 different languages with all those people that are out there. Think how much more impactful I could be if that skill was given to me or if I was blessed with that skill. So, nothing against animals, but I'm a people person. I'm the chief people officer, so I want to be able to talk to people in their own native language and not necessarily I'll leave the animals to somebody else who picked that skill.
Okay, fair enough. I think I agree with you, actually.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so my last question is, if you were to give yourself advice, okay, the Omar from 20 plus years ago, whenever you started your leadership career, what would that advice be?
Oh, wow. So one of the things that I tried to do when I was going through my career was I tried to absorb as much knowledge and information as I could. I tried to surround myself with mentors. I would probably double down on those efforts. I would say, do it more. Do it more. Learn from more people. Engage with more people. Ask more people for their opinion. I had a great set of role models and mentors that were around me. But I would say, how do you expand that? How do you get more people like the people who are around you to give you advice? The advice that I received has been invaluable to me in my career, but I just think about all the people who I walk by who I did not get an opportunity to engage with, who I did not get enough opportunity to spend time with, and how could have I spent more time with them as they were growing up? I think about, my father, my father and I, we spent a lot of time together, but how could I have learned more from him when he was here with us? How could I have learned more from my grandfather when he was here with us? Don't waste time. We have two assets in life. One is time and one is money. As I approach the 40th anniversary of my 20th birthday, I'm more concerned about time now than I am money.
I love that. That's a great way to end it right there, because that is so true.
Yeah.
Time is one of those things that you cannot get back.
You can't.
Money you can earn back.
Money you can earn back.
You cannot earn time back.
Today is gone. You won't get it back. The things that we've done today, we will never be able to get those things back. So we're running out of time, Rollis, and we are literally running out of time.
Okay, listen, this has been great. This time has flown by. Thank you so much for your time. On behalf of all of our listeners, we want to thank you for your time you spent with us today.
And thank you to the listeners out there, and hopefully they'll enjoy this podcast or this talk that we had together.
Excellent. And by the way, what's a great way for folks to connect with you further?
LinkedIn. If you hit me up on LinkedIn, I will probably respond. I'll try to respond as fast as I can, but believe me, there's a lot of people connecting with me on LinkedIn. But I do have a LinkedIn presence out there, and so if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that would be great. We try to send something out twice a week to just try to keep people engaged and knowing what we're doing here at Harris Health, but also what is going on to motivate people, inspire people, and maximize their own potentials.
I love that. I have to ask you one more thing.
Okay.
How important is video? How important do you think video is? That's a big part of what we do, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts overall on video?
Well, I think that video is the new king. As I look at the things that are transpiring, people can watch a 30-second video, people can watch a 2-minute video. My daughter my daughter learns how to do all types of things via video. So, we were fixing something at the house the other day, and she said, well, let me pull up a video on how to do this. And so within 2 minutes, I was like, oh yeah, we can do that. As a matter of fact, this is just a funny story, Rollins. She was living in Louisiana, and I was living here, and the brake lights went out. One of the bulbs went out on her car. And so, I'm like, oh, well, take it to the shop and, we'll send you the money to get it done. She said, no, Dad, I want to watch a video. She watched the video and replaced the brake light bulb on her car.
Wow.
Absolutely. She is her mother's child, but that part she got from her father. Just fearless, and I think that is important. And I think videos certainly help people learn those types of things right now. So I think video is the new king of how we get things accomplished.
Awesome. Appreciate it.